Julietta is one of the trans widows featured in Vaishnavi Sundar's documentary Behind the Looking Glass. Tonight, Julietta is going to share her experience of doing the interview for Behind the Looking Glass, what it was like watching the film, and seeing and hearing other trans widows sharing their stories. Now, I'd like to hand over to Julietta. Julietta, please.
Thank you, Janet. So I identify as Julietta, and I'm one of the trans widows featured in the recent documentary Behind the Looking Glass by Vaishnavi Sundar and Lime Soda Films. A quick background to my story is that I became what's known as a trans widow in 2022. That is, my husband at the time came out one evening and said to me that he is now a woman. And that's after I had been with him for 7 years and one little baby boy later. Um, and he picked wonderful timing because he told me just a few weeks before our son's birthday that year. And when he did tell me about it, he had everything lined up and ready to go. So he had like his doctor's appointments all lined up. He had a separate closet in his office room that had all new clothes, underwear, silicone breasts. He had hair and nail appointments all booked for the coming weeks. So it was, yeah, he had done all that behind my back. Um, so soon after, he became aggressive and violent towards me because I didn't go along with it. So I left the family home pretty soon. Um, didn't bother him though because he got his boyfriend to move in to the family home pretty much immediately and lied to me about it for several months. So that's a bit of the background of what happened. Um, at that time, I didn't know about the gender ideology. I hadn't heard of the terms like gender critical, radical feminist, or TERF. I had no idea. All I knew, like at the time, was people can't change sex. I definitely didn't see him as a woman, and I knew that he will never become a woman. So that was just my own thinking at the time. I s- then I started searching online for information to see, are there any others who felt the way I felt, thought about it the way I thought about. Um, that's when I found the 4-part documentary on YouTube. Uh, it's the film Dysphoric. So it was one of the very early um, piece of material, I suppose, that I stumbled upon. I watched it. Not sure how much I absorbed it at the time. I felt I felt a bit of a relief though, knowing that there were people out there who didn't go along with the ideology. That I wasn't alone in my thinking. But I still didn't think that film was all that relevant to me. I thought, oh, that's a film in India about women and girls in India, and filmmaker. I just didn't think the filmmaker would be really interested in other countries or like, I guess my sort of story where you're kind of the person that's left behind when these people transition, quote unquote transition. I don't remember precisely how I got connected with Vaishnavi at the time, but I do remember it was pretty soon after I left my ex, and definitely not that long after I had seen Dysphoric. So I knew it was like Vaishnavi and Lime Soda Films had done that um, movie documentary, so I knew who I was talking to. We started communication through email at first, and then she reached out and made an appointment for an interview online. I was very surprised to hear that somebody was interested in the topic of trans widows. Um, so when we were in communication through email, some weeks had passed. By that time, I kept my online sort of research. I had come across this website called Trans Widow Voices, where there's like a collective of stories. of other trans widows. I had read through some of them, and a common theme was that the lack of acknowledgement that the women received. And personally, I had experienced similar with my friends at the time and even some family members. So I was surprised and grateful that somebody was interested in hearing my side of the story. We did the interview. It was an evening for me. It might have been late 2022, maybe it was early 2023 when we did the interview. And everything was still very raw for me. I remember I was quite emotional. Vaishnavi was very professional. Um, she was very professional, but at the same time, she was very personable and sympathetic. She asked very open ended questions, which I really liked because it gave me the opportunity to just speak freely, elaborate, um, and just really get my get my emotions out to some extent as well. And she was a great listener. She listened intently and she asked probing questions, but like it was never in an intrusive or in any insensitive way. Um, so, like I said, I was quite emotional and I felt a little bit embarrassed after the interview. And I just thought, oh, what a mess. I didn't think I gave anything useful to her in that interview. And to be honest, I'm still surprised she got any useful material out of that. Um, so yeah, that was kind of how I felt about the interview and what I was feeling at the time. It was, I don't think it hadn't been a year since I left my ex at that time. I still had my son was still quite young. So yeah, it was I felt really heard and it was nice to know that a filmmaker, an advocate for women's rights was actually interested in this subset of the bigger issue, I suppose. Um, so obviously, because some between the interview and when the movie finally came out last year, because there was a bit of time, there were times that I thought like it might not happen. Um, but at the same time, things moved along in my life. I made more new connections with other women who felt similar about these issues. I learned a lot. I got through the separation, I got through the divorce. My life was starting to improve in some ways. Um, and in between, like after the interview and before the movie came out, during that period, I also came across a YouTuber called Uta Hagen, a grass widow. I wrote to her and we started communicating. And then through that, I found out she had also done an interview with Vaishnavi for the film. And she was a great source of support for me because she had gone through it um, some years prior and her children are all grown up now. So she was a little bit like, I guess, like a bit of a mother figure to me, helping me through process some of the emotions. And there were times that I said to her, "Oh, I don't think this film's going to happen. Like, I haven't heard much because I was following Lime Soda Films and I was following Vaishnavi. I didn't, and I thought, oh, like, who's going to watch that film? Nobody's going to care. Maybe it's a really tough topic. Like, maybe nobody wants to hear about it." And Uta said, "No, no, it'll come out. Don't worry." Like she has so much faith, and she was right. So um, that was wonderful. And I guess looking back, it was really nice that people had faith and there were women that were hopeful about it. Um, so, like I said, I was following Lime Soda Films and Vaishnavi on social media platforms, and it was really great to see every time she posted an update or like little snippets of the trailer. Um, she'd put her fundraising and um, links and things like that. It was really like how should I describe it? It wasn't just like I was happy and joyful, but it was like I was really touched, and it really made me feel seen and um, like like made me feel like what I went through was a real thing, and it's something that changed my life drastically. It's something that has so much impact on my son's life, who's still quite young, and we don't even know what the impact would be on him later down the track. And so it was, I was really touched. Um, and yeah, so when she finally announced the release date, I think, I can't remember when that came out, the actual announcement, sometime in 2024, I was just so excited, but, I was also a little bit nervous because I thought, "Oh, what if my ex found out about it? Um, will he retaliate? Will he take any legal action against me?" But mind you, at that time, I didn't even know that I would be featured in the film because I knew that she had taken, a bunch of interviews and can't include everything. So, um, but there was always that worry, like, what if my ex found out and then what if there was something he could do to take me to court? That's probably the most thing I was worried about the most. Like, what if he could take me to court over something? But then I thought, like, what can he possibly accuse me of? All I did was share what happened from my point of view. Um, Obviously, I didn't disclose any names or any identifying details. And what I spoke about was my emotions, how I processed it, how it affected me. So, you know, logically, like I couldn't think of any reason why or how he could accuse me of any wrongdoings on his behalf. So I put that worry aside and started really, really looking forward to seeing the film. Um, so when the day came, I joined the live stream like many others. It was very early in the morning here in Australia. I watched it on my tablet. I remember I was still in bed, um, and I was really like excited, nervous, all those feelings. And when I watched it, it was so much better than I ever imagined myself. Um, the topic was so streamlined through the film, it was so well presented. And I was quite pleasantly surprised to see myself in it because like I said, I was very emotional when I did the interview, several years ago. So I didn't think I would be featured in it at all. And it didn't matter. Like, I was just really happy to see a film about trans widows and the families of these men um, finally being released. So I was very pleasantly surprised to see little bits of my story in there too. The days that followed after that movie was uploaded, it was it was a little bit surreal because I kept getting a few text messages and a couple of phone calls from some of the women that I had met through over the past year or two. So they knew that I had done the interview, so they knew it was me. And it was so great to hear them praise, like, not me, but just praise the film and just say, like, some of these women, they were not trans widows themselves, so it was really great to hear them say that the film really showed the emotions and the emotional side of things and how delicate it is to sometimes navigate these relationships. with the men, especially when there are children involved. And in some of like countries like Australia and some of the other countries that of the women that were featured in the documentary, where the laws are, very tilted towards trans identifying men. Um, so it was nice to hear others sort of acknowledge that it is a delicate situation. And it was really nice to see Facebook groups that I'm part of, like posting about it. So yeah, and I thought to myself, like, there are people who care. So that was, I don't know, like, dare I say, validating, or even though I hate that word. Um, so yeah, I know YouTube has, I think, shadow banned the film and made it like difficult for it to come up in search results. But I think the fact that it's still online is fantastic. And I'm sure most of you already know that Lime Soda Films have been releasing short stories of some of the individual stories as well. Um, and again, that's really fantastic. I always push the notification button to get notified when they come out. I must say, haven't been joining the live stream for those, but the very next day I always listen to those. And when I listen to those stories, oh, it's like I have to fight back the urge to yell through my headphones and say, like, my ex did that too. Or like, yep, I felt the same way. Or yes, that happened to me too. And it's like amazing how many similarities there are between these stories, even though most of us are like from very different parts of the world and in very different age categories and stages of life, and yeah, things like that. Um, so I hope that the film gives a bit more of an insight into what happens to the wives and children of men who get these magical lady feelings. I hope people who are fortunate enough to not experience it personally can understand how our lives are like intertwined with these men because of our kids, even after divorce. Divorce, um, and because of the laws, there is very little, if at all, we can do to keep the children away from them. I know, like, I've seen some people, um, some discourse online, comments being thrown around like, why doesn't she just take the kids away from him? She's just as guilty because she allows him to see the kids. And the reality is, when you live in countries like Australia, there's literally nothing we can do to stop them accessing the kids. In fact, if you try to stop that, we could be held in contempt of court, and like, we could lose more custody and give them more time with the kids, and definitely don't want that. So yeah, it's a tricky situation, but I hope the film gives a little bit of insight into that, and people can appreciate the um, delicacy of some of the situation. Um, I hope that if any woman sees the film, if any woman who is currently going through a similar situation, or in a marriage or a relationship with cross-sex identifying man, I hope she can watch the film and know that her feelings and experiences are just as real as anybody else's. She isn't a bad person for wanting to leave if that's what she wants to do. Um, there's no obligations to stay with men like that. And what I can tell you is that, as hard as it is at first to leave, if she can logistically do it and separate, her life will only improve. So I just hope that there are no, well, my hope is that women who are stuck in relationships and marriages with these type of men can find their way out. Um, I want to say my heartfelt thank you to Vaishnavi and her team at Lime Soda Films for making this documentary. I'm really, really grateful. And also, thank you to WDI for giving me the opportunity to talk tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julietta. That was really fascinating to hear, as I thought it would be. It is a brilliant doco. If you haven't seen it yet, why haven't you seen it yet? Go and watch it immediately and watch Dysphoric again as well. And I think that your comments, Julietta, lead really beautifully into Angie, who has waited patiently. Thank you so much, Angie, for waiting.